Welcome to Beyond the Headlines. I'm Cheryl Jennings. Today we're going to look at the topic of addictions. We often hear about addictions related to alcohol and drugs, including prescription medications and cigarettes. What we don't see as often in the headlines are emotional, behavioral addictions that are all-consuming and leave the victim feeling out of control. Now, we're going to be talking about some fairly grown-up issues, so parents, you might want to be careful about having your children watch this particular program. Emotionally addicted people can become completely wrapped up in any specific activity, ranging from gambling to overeating to sex and even shopping. Another one you might not have thought of is tanning, of all things. Every day, more than 1 million Americans climb into a tanning bed. Now, experts say there is no cure for tanning addiction or any secret pill that can help you break the habit. The only thing tanners can do is taper off and perhaps try those self-tanning lotions to get a safe tan. Well, joining us right now to talk about addictions is Dr. Stephanie Brown from the California School of Professional Psychology at Alliant International University. And she's the consulting director of the Addictions Institute. Thank you for being here today.
I'm glad to be here.
You've been doing this for 30 years?
More than 30.
More than 30 years. What does an addiction mean?
Addiction means the loss of control. That's it in a nutshell. It's behavioral, it's a loss of thinking, a change in thinking, it's emotional. The individual experiences the inability to stop a behavior, a thought, a feeling, and really then lives out of control.
You've seen, I'm sure in over 30 years, you've seen it all. What sorts of things have you seen?
Well, the one that most people know about is alcohol addiction.
Right.
Other drugs are well known. Now there's prescription medication addiction. Really a loss of control in terms of people feeling that they have to take something in order to change the way they feel, to get to sleep, to wake up in the morning. And then there are what we call officially the process addictions, which includes gambling, spending, sexual loss of control. All addiction is really propelled and motivated by a tremendous sense of emotional need.
So what do you do when I guess the first step is to realize that you have this problem, right? I mean, at what point do you even know?
Well, ultimately, that'll be a first step. It'll maybe a 10th step in a process, but ultimately each individual is going to have to come face to face with the fact that I have lost control. And that can be the beginning of healing.
Now, you touched on something I wanted to ask you about earlier about medication. We have to take something to change the way we feel or think. Manage our emotions with medicine.
That's right.
Is that a big thing? A big problem?
It's so big in our culture today. I actually say that we live in a medication-managed culture. That often, so many people's first thought in our day is, what can I take? I have a physical feeling, I have a twitch, I have an emotional feeling of anxiety perhaps.
I need to have a drink or take a pill or something?
I need to do something. And the idea now in the culture about what's normal is, you should go get something, you should take something. You should take a pill, you should eat something, you should go buy something. It's all over advertising. The mentality in the culture is that none of us should ever have to feel anything negative or not too positive either. Should we have any discomfort, we are entitled to take something.
And that's not a good thing, is it?
It's not a good thing at all.
So what do we do about that? I mean, it sounds from what you're saying is that every single person could be vulnerable to an addiction. Every
single person is vulnerable to addiction. Every single person in our culture, perhaps on the planet, can become addicted. Addiction is an obsessive compulsive attachment to needing something and turning that need into an activity, a behavior to seek a drug or the process of gambling, of spending, or even an addictive compulsion to relationship.
So it's not necessarily a chemical imbalance, but it's a thought process that we have to interrupt.
You've got it exactly.
Yeah.
Most people do not think that addiction is much more than a behavioral problem, and you should get a grip. That's the typical thinking about it. As soon as the need becomes very dominant in me, I will then begin to change my thinking to allow me to go after what I need. And I will say, I'm just going to have a bite of this,
Right.
or I'm just going to have one drink, or one pill. I'm just going to gamble this amount of money. I'm going to put it on the sevens. And I then develop a full-blown addictive thinking disorder.
Oh my, all right. Hold on to that thought because we have to take a break, but we will be back in just a moment. Now, addictions can appear in many forms. Joining me again is author, instructor, and psychologist Dr. Stephanie Brown, and also Karen Kearns. And her story is that she is a recovering love addict. And I have not heard that phrase before. So, first of all, thank you for being here, and thank you for being willing to talk about this. What is a love addict?
Love addiction is an addiction to fantasy, romance, intrigue, and codependency.
How does that manifest? How did it manifest itself for you?
It manifested in an attempt to find a person or a relationship to make me feel whole.
So what would you do?
Obsessive behaviors.
Would you go from like girlfriend, boyfriend, family member to family member, or
Romantic relationship.
romantic relationship?
Yes.
Yes. And what would you do?
I would put everything else in my life aside to try to not feel any pain that I had through the relationship.
So if it wasn't working, you try to make it work or
Yes.
manipulate them? Or?
Yes.
Now, what would you do? What would be an example?
Maybe obsessive calling, obsessive thinking, not fulfilling, not being productive in other areas of my life because my focus and attention would be on the relationship.
And then at some point you realized something's not working for you?
Yes.
What was that moment?
Actually, I probably knew something wasn't working for me a long time before I was introduced to love addiction and what it was. I had a sense that something was wrong. I didn't know what to call it or how to name it or what to do about it.
Did somebody say you need help?
What happened for me is that I was sober from drugs and alcohol and I had a relapse because I was in so much pain around the love addiction. And so somebody suggested that I read a book about it, and I related to it.
And that made a difference for you?
It made a huge difference.
Wow. All right, well, Dr. Brown, you've studied all kinds of addictions. You're listening to Karen. What are your thoughts on this?
My thoughts are that you explained it beautifully in terms of how you got caught in chasing the fantasy that you then made real. That you turned it into a real behavior with real people, and how quickly people can get lost in the obsession.
Yeah. Now, Karen, as obviously as female, can this happen with men as well? And are their behaviors different?
It absolutely can happen with men, and there are some differences between men and women. Those differences are actually in terms of what it means to be addicted. In the case of love addiction, sex addiction, relationship addiction, there are some gender cultural differences in relationship meaning. But addiction as a loss of control is exactly the same for men and women.
Karen, do you feel like you've gotten it back now? Your control back?
I feel like it's gotten very manageable, yes. But
What were some of the things? I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh, that's okay. There are still struggles. But it's incredibly manageable now.
Yeah.
Yes.
You heard about the book and you read it and you identified with it. Are there other things that you did that you would recommend to other people?
Sure, I got a support group and a therapist, both that could address love addiction for me.
And how has your life changed as a result of this?
It's drastically changed.
Yeah.
I kind of signed up because I thought I was picking the wrong people in relationships, and what happened is that my life completely changed.
So, Dr. Brown, does this mean that she was repeating the pattern and trying to find help in therapy, or that the therapy was really working?
Well, it sounds like the therapy, the support groups were incredibly helpful because you changed your behavior. And what you're describing is what happens when people enter recovery and then use all the sources of help and support. The change is going to be a result of acknowledging what had happened to you, the loss of control, being willing to face it squarely, and then you will begin to make changes.
And then, so Karen, does this mean that your life has changed so much that you can have a nice, healthy relationship?
Well, I'm looking at that.
Looking at that, okay. You're available. All right. So, Doctor, you were talking about multiple sources where she was talking about a book and support groups and, of course, therapy. Are there other things that people can look at? Internet chat rooms, for example, does that do any good?
Well, internet chat rooms are both a source of help and a source of addiction for people, which is how addiction works. Most people are turning to something for help, and it becomes an addiction. So certainly look online for sources of help with whatever the addiction is, absolutely. There are many, many other sources of help in communities as well. The 12-step programs, absolutely. Therapists, religion of every kind can be a tremendous resource.
Okay, and we're going to put a lot of those resources on our website, and I want to thank you for being brave enough to talk with us today.
You're welcome.
I appreciate
Thank
it.
you.
Thank you, Dr. Brown.
Thank you.
And we do have to take a break, but I know you're going to want to learn more about this. So to learn more about the Addictions Institute at Alliant International University, go to alliant.edu. Now, Stephanie Brown also has her own website at stephaniebrownphd.com. Stay with us, please, because we're going to be learning about the struggles of a recovering sex addict and how he is using what he has learned to help other people in a moment.